Hey hockey trainers and hockey coaches, in this video I'm going to show you the blueprint to increase your hockey players' performance so they can dominate on the ice year round. But make sure you stay until the end of the video because I've got a big surprise for you. But let's just get it right into this thing here because it all starts with periodization. Periodization, if there's one thing that I could tell you as an umbrella statement that I know would help all of the hockey trainers, hockey coaches, and aspiring hockey strength and conditioning specialists out there, is that understanding periodization to a high level is something that's going to allow you to take hockey players' results to the next level and improve their all-round performance. When you ask the average coach about periodization, they really can't explain things to you like undulating periodization, like weekly undulating periodization, like linear periodization, like block periodization. There's so many different avenues and tools at your disposal so that you can individualize the program design for the hockey player that's in front of you. Periodization is critical because if you're just program hopping, or what I call pinballing, you're going from one program to the next with no idea on what the big picture is in place. I want you to look at the hockey training year like a big puzzle, like one of those puzzles that has 3,000 different pieces to it. If you have a big picture in place, you know where each puzzle piece is going to go and you can create it according to get the result that you're after. But if you're just program hopping from one to the next, you can think about it like randomly putting puzzle pieces on the table in front of you without ever looking at the picture on the box to see where you're headed. You're not going to get the end result. Another example that I like to use is thinking about a junkyard car. You can put a car together using junkyard parts. I'm going to take this bumper from that car over here. I'm going to use this engine from this car here. I'm going to take these lights from that car there. And what you end up with is a junkyard car made from a bunch of different parts. And you know what? That car will turn on and that car will run. But do you think it's going to run as well as a Rolls Royce where each part was made specifically for that car and reverse engineered for the highest performance possible? Of course not. The junkyard car will start and it will run. And that's how you can start thinking about these random programs that you're doing. They will get some results, but that shouldn't mislead you or mistake you from seeing what's truly optimal. And that is the Rolls Royce. Something that was designed with the big picture already in mind and then reverse engineered all the way down to the last screw and bolt that goes into that car to get the highest possible level of performance output. That's how you got to start thinking about hockey players, and periodization is your first class ticket to doing it. So that's how I've broken down this blueprint for you here today. On this left-hand column, you're going to see the months of the year, and we're going to look at 12 months of hockey training so that you have a blueprint you can stick to for year-round on-ice domination for every single hockey player that comes your way. It begins with the off-season. This is months 1 to 3. Where your hockey athlete begins their off-season, of course, is context specific, but 1 to 3 is when we're going to be focusing on something known as GPP, or General Physical Preparedness. This is when we focus on the general aspects of fitness that are going to end up building the foundation for your hockey-specific level of fitness. You got to remember, a peak can only be as high as the foundation is wide. So in this general phase, we're working on mobility, we're working on strength, we're working on creating structural balance in the athlete, we're looking at building muscle mass, we're looking at building up their aerobic energy system capacity. We're doing a lot of the things that are very general in nature that many different team sports athletes need, but hockey athletes especially need from a general perspective. But as the off season goes on and we enter months 4 and 5, this is when we're going to flip the switch to SPP, or what's known as specific physical preparedness. Now we're starting to introduce a lot of the hockey-specific movements, the hockey-specific velocities, energy systems, joint angles, vectors chosen for the exercises, angle of contraction, type of contraction. All of these aspects are taken into consideration during an SPP phase so we can get the most hockey-specific result. You might be thinking, why wouldn't we stick to SPP year-round then? Well, the problem with sticking to SPP year-round is you don't develop the general qualities that you need to dominate out in the ice nearly as effectively as when you're in the SPP phase. But more importantly, those who focus on SPP year-round run into injury issues. Look, accountants don't get carpal tunnel syndrome because typing is such an intense task. That's wrong. Accountants will get carpal tunnel syndrome because typing for 8 hours a day is such a repetitive task. It's not always the intensity of the stressor that you're exposed to that causes inflammation in joints. Instead, it's the repetitive bouts of the same movement patterns that those joints are being exposed to that over time causes stress and inflammation. And yet you see so many hockey athletes do the same things year round. They try to replicate on ice skating with movements off the ice that look exactly like skating. And then in the meantime, they haven't built any structural balance around their knees to help stabilize it. So it's no surprise to somebody who understands biomechanics and periodization why that hockey athlete runs into knee pain, why the hockey athlete has hip pain, why the hockey athlete has no hip flexibility because they haven't taken time to work on that through GPP programming. There's a lot to be said about GPP, but when it comes to truly peaking hockey performance, you build your GPP foundation wide and strong. And then with these 2 months here, we train SPP to a very specific very hockey specific degree to get hockey specific results. This is when we're going to introduce a lot of the things that are really going to boost speed, conditioning, and agility out in the ice. Lastly, we're at month 6 here, and this is lastly in terms of what most refer to as the off-season, because this is our preseason phase where specific physical preparedness is at an all-time high. This is where we are doing movements that really replicate exactly what you're going to do out in the ice, and these are the movements that have the highest degree of what's known in sports science as strength transfer, meaning you're converting your gym strength into hockey strength. You're converting your muscles into hockey muscles. You're doing things that allow you to truly get an on-ice result. Therefore, transferring your strength, i.e. strength transfer, out in the ice to truly not just become more physically fit, but become a better hockey player. This is when your specific movements are at an all-time high, and this is a full month. But the back half of this month, the remaining 2 weeks before the in-season starts or before you go into hockey camps, this is when you would utilize a tapering and peaking phase, where you utilize the fitness fatigue model, drop down the amount of training intensity you're exposed to, which is going to really drop down your fatigue, overall your fatigue management, and therefore peak your performance. Tapering and peaking is a very well-documented strategy to get rid of nagging injuries, to build up a better hormone balance so that the athlete isn't in a state of overtraining. It's a great way to get glycogen status back up. It's a great way to peak overall performance because they don't have fatigue or injuries anymore, and they go into the next season like an absolute beast. That is all about the SPP phase. You can think about a lot of this stuff kind of like a slingshot. You're pulling back on the cord, and then once we enter this SPP world, that's when we release it, and that hockey athlete goes into the next season like a beast at a new level of performance that they've never seen before. They've becoming the next version of themselves out in the ice with more speed, confidence, agility, conditioning, you name it. A good off season should check all of those boxes. But then we move into the in season. The in season is much more about maintenance of general physical preparedness. maintenance of specific physical preparedness, and not overly chasing any goal. You don't want to overly chase fat loss. You don't want to overly chase muscle gain. You don't want to overly chase working on your speed and conditioning, because a lot of these things require what's known as an overload on the body, and overloads cause a lot of fatigue. But in the off season, you can present any overload you want because you can just go eat and sleep after. But during the in-season, you've got practice, you've got traveling, you've got games, you've got tournaments, you've got all kinds of things going on to where you can't afford the fatigue debt that presenting an overload on your body brings. In-season is all about maintenance. This is when we are bringing training volume down, we're bringing training intensity down, we're bringing training frequency down. What I like with my athletes ideally is 2 resistance training sessions per week, 2 mobility sessions per week, and then 1 mental training session per week that works on coordination, balance, and reaction time. This way we're marrying both mental and physical performance during the time where it matters most. That's the in-season. Once we get through that grind of the in-season of months 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, now we're focusing on the postseason. Postseason is a combination of both playoffs and the active recovery phase that you need to go through before you start to cycle over again and bring in your GPP work. Postseason is playoffs. Playoff programming is different than in-season programming. Why? Because your on-ice frequency is a lot higher in the playoffs. Not to mention your on-ice intensity is also a lot higher as well. There's a different recovery demand, there's more travel, there's more training volume on ice, which means we have to auto-regulate your training volume off ice so that you don't dig too deep of a fatigue debt moving into some of the most important games of the year, which is the playoff series, the finals, whatever it's going to be. That's where you need to be your absolute best. So we need to manage fatigue at all costs. That's what the postseason is all about. For playoffs, when it comes to the active recovery phase, 1 to 2 weeks once playoffs are done is when hockey athletes will take this time to recover. But sports science tells us that active recovery is actually more effective for recovery than doing nothing at all. Meaning, if you go for a hike or go swimming or do something that's not hockey in a low intensity manner, you'll actually recover at a faster rate than if you just play Call of Duty all day or play whatever it is all day, sit there and watch a Netflix series and binge watch it. You'll actually recover better by moving. So during the active recovery phase, I like to utilize active recovery strategies, but still do them in a hockey-specific way to build better athletes, because during the season, hockey athletes notoriously develop tightnesses within their shoulders, within their hips, within their groin. They develop tightnesses all over their body, within their hamstrings. There's so many different areas that we can utilize active recovery-based mobility circuits to break up these adhesions so that by the time they do enter the GPP phase, their body is ready for it. It's primed and ready to rock and roll and not be at any risk of injury going into the volume and intensity and frequency requirements that GPP training does offer. Okay? This is what, in a very short sense, this is what an entire year of hockey training programming looks like. But you have to understand that all programming needs to be filtered through two main pathways. Number 1 is the principles of training. Your specificity, overload, fatigue management, individualization, and variation. We need to understand the principles of training and then use them to make our decisions on the variables of training, which is training volume, intensity, and frequency. And once we've filtered through those 2 pathways, we can choose exercises that have the highest degree of strength transfer to actually make your hockey players better at hockey. We're not in the gym just to become fit. We're in the gym to become better hockey players. So if you want to learn how to do all of this stuff and have clarity and confidence about hockey training program design, then you have to check out the brand new Certified Hockey Training Specialist course. It is the only course in the entire world that's going to allow you to become what's known as a certified hockey training specialist. Become one of the few people on the planet who have that title. It's going to bring hockey parents, players, always to you so that you're working with exactly who you want to work with. And beyond that, you're getting them world-class results. You're going to become the go-to hockey strength coach in your area, the go-to hockey trainer in your area. And the best part, you're going to know exactly how to do it. There's not going to be a single plateau that comes your way where you won't know what to do. You're going to be able to increase speed, agility, conditioning, strength, structural balance, mobility, stride length, stride frequency, reaction time coordination, balance, you name it. It is all covered in the brand new Hockey Training Specialist course. Click on the link in the description below and let's go.